Mocking a human's appearance isn't cruelty. It's suicide with a prettier wrapping. I didn't believe that until I watched a 5 feet 4 inches girl with a shaved head smile at my joke and then proceed to dismantle everything I thought I knew about combat, dignity, and exactly how wrong one person could be. So let me tell you about the day I learned that judging a human by their appearance is like assuming a plasma grenade is harmless because it's small and shiny. Spoiler alert, the explosion still vaporizes you. My name is Thraken, Senior Combat Instructor at the Orbital Defense Training Complex, Sector 9, and I have trained approximately 800 warriors from 47 different species over the last 15 cycles. I have taught Krellian shock troops who could bend steel with their bare hands, Voxian assassins who could kill you 12 different ways before you finished blinking, and even those crystalline Zephrans who barely had physical bodies but could somehow still break your jaw if you annoyed them enough. Point is, I knew warriors. I knew what they looked like, how they moved, how they carried themselves. Warriors had presence, intimidation factor, the look of someone who had seen violence and come out the other side stronger. Warriors did not show up to my training facility looking like they had just escaped from a medical quarantine. The morning she arrived, I was running my advanced melee combat class through a standard endurance drill. 20 recruits, various species, all pushing themselves through the kind of workout that separates actual soldiers from civilians who thought military service sounded exciting. The facility's main entrance was visible from the training floor, which is how I saw her walk in. Small, probably 162 centimeters at most, thin build, wearing the standard olive recruit uniform that somehow managed to look 2 sizes too large despite being properly fitted. But the thing that made everyone stop and stare, the thing that made 3 recruits actually pause their exercises to gawk, was her head. Completely shaved. Smooth as polished metal. Not a single strand of hair anywhere on her skull. Now, I knew humans had hair. I had trained maybe a dozen humans over the past few cycles, and every single one had hair. Thick hair, usually. Various colors and styles, sure, but always present. Hair was apparently a big thing in human culture, some kind of identity marker or social signal. Seeing a human without it was like seeing a Thorian without scales or a Mandrel without their crest. It just looked wrong, unnatural, like something was seriously medically wrong. Recruit Vexus, a Krellian in my advanced class, was the first to laugh. Not a quiet chuckle either, a full bellowing laugh that echoed across the training floor. "Hey, instructor," he called out, pointing at the entrance. "Did medical send us a patient by mistake? Someone forget to tell her this is combat training, not radiation therapy." The other recruits joined in, some laughing, others making comments in their native languages that my translator helpfully informed me were various forms of medical condition jokes. I should have shut it down immediately. That was my job: maintain discipline, prevent harassment, create a professional training environment. But instead, I looked at this small human with her shaved head and oversized uniform, and I smiled. Actually smiled. "All right everyone, settle down," I said, but my tone was amused rather than authoritative. "Let's not make assumptions. Maybe she just has really unfortunate fashion sense." More laughter. The human stood in the doorway, completely still, watching us with these dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. No embarrassment, no anger, no emotion at all. Just watching. Waiting. My assistant instructor, Krell, a veteran Voxian with 20 years of combat experience, walked over to process her intake. I watched as he scanned her identification chip, his expression shifting from casual professionalism to something like confusion. "Instructor Thraken," he called out, his voice uncertain. "You need to see this." I walked over, still grinning from the joke I had made. The recruit straightened slightly as I approached, but still showed no emotion. Her eyes tracked my movement with an intensity that should have warned me, but I was too busy being pleased with myself to notice. "Name?" I asked, pulling up her file on my datapad. "Recruit Kendra Voss," she said. Her voice was quiet, measured, with that distinctive human accent that always sounded slightly off compared to galactic standard. "Kendra," I repeated, making a show of looking her up and down. "Let me guess, the hair is some kind of human religious thing. Cultural practice. Or did you lose a bet?" The recruits behind me snickered. Kendra's expression didn't change. "Medical necessity, sir," she said simply. "Completed treatment 6 weeks ago. Fully cleared for active duty as of yesterday." Oh. Oh no. That meant cancer, probably. Or some other serious illness that required the kind of treatment that made hair fall out. Humans were particularly susceptible to cellular degeneration diseases, something about their evolution on a high-radiation planet with a damaged ozone layer for several centuries. Medical necessity meant I had just mocked someone for surviving a potentially terminal illness. Any decent person would have apologized immediately. Any professional instructor would have moved on quickly and pretended the comment never happened. I, apparently, was neither decent nor professional that morning. Well, I said, because my mouth was apparently operating independently from my brain. At least you'll be aerodynamic during combat drills. That's something. Vexus absolutely lost it, laughing so hard he had to lean against a training dummy for support. Other recruits were grinning, watching to see how the bald human would react to their instructor publicly mocking her medical condition. Krell's expression had gone from confused to horrified, his eyes widening in that way Voxians do when they witness something catastrophically stupid happening in real time. And Kendra just smiled. Not a big smile, just a tiny upward curve of her lips that somehow made my primary and secondary stomachs both clench with sudden, inexplicable anxiety. "Thank you for the observation, sir," she said, her voice perfectly polite, perfectly professional. "I look forward to demonstrating exactly how aerodynamic I can be. That should have been my second warning." Actually, Krell's horrified expression should have been my first warning, and this should have been my second. But I was too committed to my role as the amusing instructor who kept morale high with casual humor. "I'm sure you will, recruit," I said, waving her toward the equipment lockers. "Get changed and join the endurance drill. Let's see what you've got." She nodded once, turned, and walked toward the locker room with smooth, economical movements that suggested way more body awareness than I had given her credit for. The moment she was out of earshot, Krell grabbed my arm with enough force to actually hurt. "Are you insane?" he hissed, his Voxian vocal cords producing that subsonic frequency that indicated serious distress. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "Made a joke," I said, pulling my arm free. "Lightened the mood. It's called building rapport, Krell. The recruits need to know I'm approachable." "You mocked a human who just survived a terminal illness," Krell said, his voice climbing an octave. "A human, Thraken. From Earth. The Deathworld. The planet that makes Krellia look like a vacation resort." So I was genuinely confused by his panic. "She's tiny. She looks like a strong breeze would knock her over. Terminal illness or not, this is a combat training facility. If she can't handle a little joke, she definitely can't handle actual military service." Krell stared at me for a long moment, then released a sound that his species made when they had given up on reasoning with someone. "I have trained humans before," he said quietly. 3 of them, back at my previous posting. You know what all 3 had in common? What? They all looked harmless. Every single one. Small, polite, unassuming. You know what else they had in common? They all scored in the top percentile of their graduating class. One of them is now a Special Forces operator. Another runs an entire combat division. The third saved her entire unit during a hostile boarding action by doing things that are still classified. I laughed. Krell was clearly exaggerating to mess with me, paying me back for all the times I had pranked him during our years working together. Sure, Krell. And I'm secretly the Emperor's long-lost cousin. Come on, look at her. She's recovering from a serious illness, she has no hair, and she weighs maybe 50 kilograms soaking wet. I'll be surprised if she makes it through the first week. Then you're going to be very surprised, Krell said flatly. And probably very injured. He walked away, muttering something in Voxian that my translator refused to process, which meant it was probably extremely profane. I dismissed his concerns and turned back to my class, which was watching this exchange with obvious interest. All right, show's over, I barked. Back to your drills. I want 3 more circuits before cooldown, and if I see anyone slacking, we're adding a 4th. They groaned but complied, returning to their exercises with the resigned determination of people who knew their instructor was serious about physical conditioning. Kendra emerged from the locker room 10 minutes later, now wearing proper training gear that actually fit. Without the oversized uniform, I could see she was more muscular than I had initially assessed, lean but defined, with the kind of wiry build that suggested speed rather than strength. She still looked small though. Still looked fragile. Still looked like someone who had recently been very, very sick. Voss, I called out. You're joining the circuit. We're on lap 3 of 5. Try to keep up. Yes, sir, she said, moving to join the other recruits on the track. The circuit was designed to be brutal. A full lap around the facility's perimeter, roughly 800 meters, with obstacles every 50 meters. Climbing walls, crawl spaces, balance beams, various elements that tested strength, endurance, and coordination simultaneously. Most recruits struggled through their first attempt and needed weeks to complete 5 laps without collapsing. I watched Kendra approach the first obstacle, a 3-meter climbing wall with minimal handholds. Vexus was ahead of her, using his superior Krellian strength to simply power up the wall through brute force. Kendra paused at the base, studied the wall for maybe 2 seconds, then jumped, cut a hold I hadn't even known was there, and pulled herself up with smooth efficiency. She was over the top before Vexus had finished celebrating his own ascent. Okay. Maybe she had some training. That was good, actually. Meant she might last longer than I had predicted. The second obstacle was a low crawl under razor wire, 15 meters of mud and misery that required recruits to keep their entire body flat to the ground. Most species struggled with this because their natural instinct was to raise up, to use their strength to move faster. Kendra dropped to the ground and flowed through the crawl space like water finding the path of least resistance. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just smooth forward progress that had her emerging from the other side while larger recruits were still halfway through. By the third obstacle, a balance beam suspended over a water pit, I was paying full attention. Kendra crossed it without breaking stride, arms out for balance, her bare feet somehow finding perfect purchase on the narrow surface. She made it look easy, effortless, while behind her a Thorian recruit fell into the water for the second time. She's fast, Vexus observed, jogging up beside me. He was breathing hard, sweat pouring off his gray skin. For a human. Still small though. Let's see how she handles the strength obstacles. He was right to be skeptical. The circuit included several elements specifically designed to test raw power. Weighted sled pulls, wall ball throws, heavy bag carries. These obstacles separated species with natural strength advantages from those who relied primarily on technique and endurance. Kendra reached the sled pull, a 150-kilogram sled that needed to be dragged 20 meters using only a rope harness. Vexus had struggled with this despite his considerable strength. Smaller species often couldn't complete it at all on their first attempt. I expected Kendra to fail here, to demonstrate the limits of her small human frame and prove that my initial assessment was correct. She was quick, sure, had decent technique, but actual combat required strength. Power. The ability to move heavy objects and hit hard when it mattered. She attached the harness, gripped the rope, and pulled. The sled moved. Not slowly, not with visible struggle, but with steady, inexorable progress. Her legs drove into the ground, her core tight, her entire body working as a single integrated unit to generate force that seemed impossible from her size. She completed the 20 meters in less time than Vexus had, unhooked the harness, and continued to the next obstacle without even breathing particularly hard. How is she doing that? Vexus asked, his voice confused. She weighs half what I do. Basic physics says she shouldn't be able to move that sled that easily. Technique, I said, but I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Proper form can compensate for a lot. No, Krell said, appearing beside me like a particularly smug ghost. Not technique. Training. Serious, intense, probably years of training that taught her exactly how to maximize every bit of strength her body can generate. Humans don't have natural physical advantages, so the ones who pursue combat specialties learn to be incredibly efficient. By lap 4, every recruit was struggling except Kendra. She maintained her pace, completing obstacles with the same smooth efficiency she had shown on lap 1. No slowdown, no visible fatigue, just consistent forward progress that was becoming genuinely unsettling to watch. She's not even sweating, one of the recruits muttered as Kendra passed. How is she not sweating? She is sweating, I said, because I could see the moisture on her skin and soaking into her shirt. She's just not showing fatigue. There's a difference. Humans have exceptional endurance, Krell said, his tone suggesting he was enjoying my growing discomfort. Something about their evolutionary history as persistence hunters. They're not built for explosive power, but they can maintain moderate exertion for absurd lengths of time. I've seen humans run for hours without stopping. Literally hours, lap 5 began, and I noticed something that made my teaching instincts kick in despite my earlier mockery. Kendra's form was getting tighter, more controlled, like she was compensating for fatigue by focusing on perfect technique. She was tired, definitely tired, but using skill to mask it. That was actually impressive. Most recruits let their form deteriorate when exhausted. She was doing the opposite. She crossed the finish line 47 seconds after Vexus, who had a significant strength and size advantage, and roughly 3 minutes before the next closest recruit. Her chest was heaving now, finally showing visible signs of exertion, but she remained standing, hands on her hips, breathing deeply and controlled. "Not bad, Voss," I said, walking over. My tone was more respectful than before, because even I could recognize genuine capability when it was demonstrated this clearly. "Solid first showing." "You've obviously trained before." "Yes, sir," she said between breaths. "Since I was 6, I repeated. "Standard years." "Yes, sir." "Martial arts initially, then added endurance running at 8, strength training at 12, tactical combat at 15." She paused, taking another deep breath. "I was preparing for military service before I got sick, before she got sick." The implication being that all this capability, this performance that had impressed me despite my biases, was from someone who had been forced to stop training during treatment and was still recovering. This was her diminished capacity. "What kind of martial arts?" Krell asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Muay Thai, and Krav Maga," Kendra said. "Plus weapon systems training through my planet's youth military preparation program." I did some quick mental math. If she had started at 6 and was now, I checked her file, 22, that was 16 years of training. Minus maybe a year for illness and recovery, 15 years of dedicated combat training. That was more dedicated training time than most of my recruits had been alive. "Well," I said, because I needed to say something, and apologizing for my earlier comments still felt too much like admitting I had been completely wrong. "That explains the performance. Good work. Hit the showers and report back in 30 minutes for classroom instruction." She nodded, still catching her breath, and walked toward the facilities. The moment she was gone, every recruit started talking at once, discussing what they had just witnessed, placing new bets on how she would perform in other exercises. Vexus looked genuinely disturbed, his confidence visibly shaken by being outperformed by someone half his size. I should have left it there. Should have learned my lesson, adjusted my assessment, and moved forward with appropriate respect for Kendra's obvious capabilities. Should have, being the critical phrase. Instead, when the class reassembled for tactical instruction, I decided to double down on my earlier humor because maintaining my image as the witty instructor felt more important than basic human decency. "Before we begin today's tactical scenarios," I announced to the assembled class, "I want to address what we witnessed during the physical circuit." Recruit Voss performed admirably, demonstrating that even without hair to slow her down, humans can be surprisingly capable. I paused for the laugh I knew would come. "In fact, I'm starting to think maybe all our recruits should shave their heads." Clearly it's the secret to human performance. The class erupted in laughter. Vexus was grinning again, his earlier concern forgotten. Other recruits made jokes about aerodynamics and reduced drag. It was exactly the reaction I wanted, proof that I could maintain morale and keep the atmosphere light even while pushing recruits hard. Kendra sat in the back row, perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on me with that same unsettling intensity from this morning. And then, for the second time that day, she smiled. This smile was different though, wider, more genuine, and somehow infinitely more terrifying than the first. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter. "I have a request." "Go ahead, recruit," I said, still riding high on successful joke landing. "I would like to challenge you to a combat demonstration, sir. So I can show the class exactly how effective a hairless human can be in actual fighting conditions." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, except the floor was reinforced metal and pins don't really make noise when dropped in military facilities, but the point stands. It was very, very quiet. "A combat demonstration," I repeated slowly. "You want to fight me? Your instructor? Who has 15 years of combat experience and probably 80 kilograms on you?" "Yes, sir," she said pleasantly. "Standard sparring rules. Non-lethal contact, fight until submission or knockout. Unless you think that would be inappropriate." Sir, oh, she was good. She had backed me into a corner using nothing but politeness and proper military respect. If I refused, I looked scared of a tiny human recruit who had just recovered from a serious illness. If I accepted, I risked looking like a bully beating up on someone smaller and weaker, assuming I won. Which I would obviously win. Obviously. I mean, I was a senior combat instructor. I had fought professionally before moving into teaching. I had training in 6 different martial systems and actual combat experience from 2 different military campaigns. She was a 22-year-old human who had been sick until recently and weighed maybe 60 kilograms with her boots on. This should be simple. So why was Krell making that distressed subsonic sound again? Instructor Thraken, Krell said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss this privately first. No need, I said, waving him off. Recruit Voss wants a learning opportunity. Who am I to deny that? Everyone outside to the combat ring. Let's make this educational. The class filed out with barely contained excitement, chattering about what they were about to witness. This was unusual. Instructors rarely demonstrated against individual recruits, and when they did it was typically to showcase specific techniques against a willing partner. This was going to be an actual fight, or at least as close to one as sparring rules allowed. Krell followed me to the equipment lockers, his expression suggesting he was watching someone walk enthusiastically toward their own execution. Thraken, listen to me very carefully. You need to take this seriously. You need to treat her like a legitimate threat. She weighs 60 kilograms. Krell, she's a human from a Deathworld who has trained in multiple combat systems since childhood and apparently decided that surviving cancer wasn't enough excitement in her life. Weight doesn't matter when skill differential is this significant. I appreciate your concern, I said, pulling on protective sparring gear. But I've got this. I'll take it easy on her, make it look good for the class, let her get a few hits in so she doesn't feel completely outmatched. It'll be fine. Krell made a sound like someone giving up on life. I'm calling medical preemptively. For you, not her. Dramatic as always, I said, checking my gear. Standard protective padding for vital areas, enough to prevent serious injury but still allow full range of motion. I'll buy you drinks after this when you realize you were worried about nothing. I'm going to need those drinks regardless, Krell muttered. Possibly several bottles worth. The combat ring was a raised platform, 10 meters square, with padded flooring and safety rails around the edges. Medical scanners surrounded the area, ready to detect serious injuries and stop the fight if necessary. The entire class had assembled around the ring, many recording on their personal devices because apparently my humiliation needed to be preserved for posterity. Not that I thought I would be humiliated. That seemed unlikely. Kendra was already in the ring, wearing sparring gear identical to mine, rolling her shoulders and shaking out her arms in a pre-fight routine that looked oddly professional. Without hair, with her dark eyes focused and her jaw set, she looked different somehow. Not sick, not fragile, but concentrated. Distilled down to pure function. All right, class, I announced, climbing into the ring. Today's demonstration will showcase the importance of size and reach advantages in combat, as well as how experience can overcome enthusiasm. Recruit Voss has volunteered to help illustrate these concepts. I volunteered to illustrate what happens when you underestimate your opponent. Sir, Kendra corrected, her voice carrying clearly across the ring. But we can go with your version if it helps. The recruits laughed nervously, unsure whether this was banter or genuine hostility. I smiled, determined to keep this light and educational. Standard sparring rules, I announced. Non-lethal strikes, fight continues until submission, knockout, or instructor intervention. Agreed. Agreed, Kendra said. We took our positions on opposite sides of the ring. I settled into a standard neutral stance, hands up, weight balanced, ready to control the pace and make this look good without actually hurting her. Kendra dropped into a stance that made my combat instincts suddenly scream warnings I should have heeded. Low center of gravity, hands loose but ready, weight forward on the balls of her feet. It was a stance that prioritized mobility and explosive movement, the kind of position someone takes when they plan to strike fast and often. Begin, Krell announced, and I swear he sounded like he was officiating a funeral. I moved forward slowly, keeping my guard up, planning to test her defenses with a few light jabs before transitioning to a gentle takedown that would end this cleanly. I extended my right hand in a slow, controlled strike aimed at her shoulder. Kendra wasn't there. She had slipped to my left while I was still processing her movement, and I felt something impact my ribs. Not hard enough to injure through the padding, but definitely hard enough to register. A body shot, quick and precise. I pivoted, adjusted my guard, tried again with a combination. Left jab to draw her response, right cross to capitalize on the opening, simple boxing fundamentals that should work against anyone. She ducked under the jab, stepped inside my cross, and drove her palm into my solar plexus. The air left my lungs in a rush. How did she hit that hard? Where was she generating that much power from? I backpedaled, creating space, reassessing. Okay, she was faster than I expected and hit harder than physics should allow. That was fine. I still had significant advantages in reach, strength, and weight. I just needed to use them properly. I came in harder this time, committing to actual technique instead of patronizing demonstration strikes. A proper combination, setting up a clinch that would let me use my superior strength to control her and end this. Kendra met my advance with a low kick that slammed into my lead leg. My knee buckled, just for a second, just long enough for her to close distance and slam her elbow into my helmet. The impact rang through my skull like a bell. Stars danced at the edge of my vision. I stumbled back, guard finally coming all the way up, treating this like an actual fight instead of a teaching exercise. She pressed forward, not giving me time to recover. A flurry of strikes, hands and elbows and knees, each one precise and targeted at specific points. She hit my liver, my floating ribs, the inside of my thigh, my tricep when I tried to grab her. Every strike had a purpose, designed to compromise my structure and mobility. I managed to catch her with a backhand, a clumsy wild swing that connected with her shoulder and should have sent her flying given our size difference. She rolled with it, used the momentum to spin away and reset her position, completely unbothered. "You're telegraphing your attacks, sir," she said, and there was no mockery in her voice, just a calm observation. "Your shoulders dip before you strike. Makes you predictable." Then she came at me again, and I realized with slowly dawning horror that she was not just winning. She was teaching. Every strike she landed was a lesson in efficiency. Every time she evaded my attacks, she was demonstrating superior footwork. She was conducting a seminar on technical combat superiority using my body as the instructional dummy. I tried to grapple her, use my weight advantage to drag her to the ground where size would matter more. She accepted the clinch, then demonstrated what apparently 16 years of jiu-jitsu training looked like against someone who had learned grappling as one skill among many rather than as a dedicated art. She manipulated my balance, used my own momentum against me, and somehow transitioned from a defensive clinch to having my arm hyperextended in a lock that sent lightning bolts of pain through my shoulder. I tapped. Actually tapped out. Against a recruit. In front of my entire class. Kendra released immediately, stepped back, offered me a hand up with perfect professional courtesy. "Good match, sir," she said. I took her hand, let her help me to my feet, and looked out at the assembled class. Every single recruit was staring in complete silence, their expressions ranging from shock to awe to barely suppressed delight at seeing their instructor thoroughly dismantled. "Well," I said, because someone had to say something. That was certainly educational." "Indeed it was," Kendra said. She turned to face the class, her voice shifting into instructor mode that sounded far more authoritative than mine currently did. "The lesson here is that assumptions are dangerous. Size matters, strength matters, experience matters, but skill and technique can equalize or overcome those advantages. Never underestimate an opponent based on appearance. Never assume you know someone's capabilities without testing them. And never, ever mock someone for things outside their control, because you never know what they've survived to get here or what they learned along the way." She looked back at me. "Right, sir. I should have been angry. Should have felt humiliated. Should have reasserted my authority and put her in her place for embarrassing me in front of the recruits. Instead, I found myself nodding. Right, I agreed. That's exactly right." Krell appeared at the edge of the ring, medical scanner in hand, that smug Voxian expression clearly visible. "Do you need medical attention, Instructor Thrackan?" "Just my pride," I muttered. "That might be beyond medical science to repair." The class stayed silent for another moment, then Vexus started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster, and within seconds the entire class had joined in applause that was probably meant for Kendra rather than for my educational beatdown. "Dismissed," I called out, my voice hoarse. "We'll resume tactical instruction tomorrow." Tonight, think about what you witnessed and what it means for your own training. The recruits filed out, still buzzing with excitement, already reviewing the footage they had captured. I watched them go, then turned to Kendra, who was removing her sparring gear with the same efficient movements she brought to everything else. "Recruit Voss," I said. She stopped, turned to face me, her expression neutral. "Sir, I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies, actually. For this morning, for the aerodynamic comment, for treating your medical condition as a source of humor, and for assuming your appearance told me anything about your capabilities. That was unprofessional, cruel, and beneath the standards I should maintain as an instructor." She studied me for a long moment, those dark eyes measuring something I couldn't identify. Then she nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "Apology accepted, sir. For what it's worth, I've heard worse. People see the bald head and make assumptions. Either they think I'm dying or they think I'm trying to make some kind of statement. Most don't bother asking why before they judge. Why did you volunteer for combat training so soon after treatment?" I asked. "Medical clearance aside, you could have taken more recovery time." "No one would have questioned it because I didn't want to be defined by being sick," she said simply. "I spent a year as the cancer patient, going through treatment, dealing with side effects, watching my hair fall out, feeling weak and tired all the time. I survived that. I beat it. And now I want to be defined by what I can do, not what happened to me. Coming here, proving I still have everything I trained for, that's taking my life back." I felt something uncomfortable twist in my chest. Guilt, maybe. Shame, definitely. "And I tried to reduce you back to just the sick person." "Yes, sir, you did." No anger in her voice, just statement of fact. "But you also gave me the opportunity to prove you wrong. Some people don't get that chance. They just get judged and dismissed without ever being allowed to demonstrate their actual capabilities." "The hair will grow back?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. "None of my business." "Sorry, it will," she said, running a hand over her smooth scalp. "Already starting to, actually. Feels weird, like fuzzy peach skin. Should be back to normal length in about a year. But honestly, I kind of like it short now. Less maintenance, stays out of my way during training, and it's an excellent filter for identifying people worth my time." "How so?" "People who see past it and treat me normally are worth knowing. People who mock it or treat me differently reveal exactly who they are immediately." "Saves time," she smiled slightly. "You revealed yourself pretty clearly this morning." "Sir, that I did," I agreed. "I'll work on being someone worth knowing instead of someone who fails your filter test." "I appreciate that, sir." She finished removing her gear, stowed it properly, and turned back to me. "Permission to speak freely?" "Granted. You're a good instructor. The physical circuit is well designed, the progression makes sense, and you clearly know combat theory. But you let your biases blind you, and that made you sloppy. You came into that ring thinking you'd already won, and that's why you lost. If you had taken me seriously from the start, treated me like an actual opponent instead of a teaching prop, the fight might have gone differently." "You still would have won," I said. "Your technical skills are significantly beyond mine in grappling, and your striking is cleaner, maybe," she acknowledged. "But you would have made me work harder for it. And honestly, that's what I was hoping for. A real challenge, not a patronizing lesson." I felt that twist of guilt again, sharper this time. "You got a patronizing lesson anyway, just aimed at me instead of you, the best kind," she said with a slight grin. "The kind that teaches the teacher." She headed toward the facility exit, then paused. "For what it's worth, sir, the aerodynamic joke was actually kind of funny. Terrible timing, completely inappropriate, definitely offensive, but the core joke structure was sound. If you had made it about someone who wasn't recovering from a serious illness, it would have landed better." "I'll keep that in mind," I said dryly. "Maybe workshop my material before testing it on people who have legitimate reasons to kick my ass." "Probably wise, sir." She left, and I stood alone in the combat ring, surrounded by medical scanners that had fortunately not needed to intervene, processing everything that had happened. Krell appeared beside me, moving with that silent Voxian grace that always made me jump. "So," he said. "Learn anything today?" "That I'm an idiot," I said. "That assumptions are dangerous. That humans are terrifying. That cancer survivors have zero patience for my nonsense. Should I continue?" "All valid lessons," Krell agreed. Also that sometimes the smallest packages contain the most devastating surprises. She went easy on you, by the way. I stared at him. That was easy. She pulled every strike. I was watching on the scanners. She has enough power generation to have broken ribs through your padding, but every hit was measured to impact without causing real damage. She was teaching you a lesson, not trying to hurt you. Fantastic, I muttered. I got thoroughly beaten by someone who was actively trying not to hurt me. That makes it so much better. It should, Krell said seriously. It means she's not vindictive. She had every right to make you pay for those comments, to embarrass you completely, maybe send you to medical with some interesting injuries to explain. Instead, she demonstrated superiority while maintaining professionalism. That's impressive restraint. He was right, of course. Kendra could have hurt me badly and would have been justified in doing so. Instead, she had made her point without causing lasting damage to anything except my pride. I really need to stop underestimating humans, I said. Yes, Krell agreed. You really, really do. The next morning, I arrived at the facility early, before any recruits were scheduled to appear. I had spent most of the night reviewing footage of the fight, analyzing where I had gone wrong, cataloging all the moments where my assumptions had made me vulnerable. The video had already gone viral through military training networks, with over 50,000 views and climbing. The comments were predictably merciless. I was checking equipment when Kendra walked in, also early, wearing workout clothes and carrying a training bag. She seemed surprised to see me. Instructor, she said, nodding respectfully. Early start, could say the same for you, I replied. Additional training. Always. She set her bag down, began stretching. Skill degrades without constant maintenance, and I lost a lot of conditioning during treatment. Trying to build it back up. Your conditioning looked pretty solid yesterday for basic performance, sure. But I used to run twice this distance without breathing hard. Used to lift significantly heavier weights. I'm maybe 80% back to my pre-illness capabilities. Still working on that last 20%, I watched her stretch, noting the careful attention she paid to proper form, the systematic way she worked through each muscle group. Can I ask you something, Recruit Voss? Of course, sir. Why didn't you refuse the circuit yesterday? You had just arrived, you're still recovering, you could have asked for modified training or additional time to acclimate. Instead, you jumped straight into the advanced endurance drill. Why? She paused mid-stretch, considering the question. Because asking for accommodation would have confirmed everyone's assumptions. The sick girl who needs special treatment, the weak human who can't keep up. I needed to prove immediately that those assumptions were wrong. Otherwise, I'd spend the entire training cycle fighting against low expectations. So you pushed yourself harder to overcome bias. I pushed myself to meet the standard, she corrected. Same standard as everyone else. That's all I want, sir. Equal treatment, equal expectations, equal opportunities to succeed or fail based on my actual performance. That's fair, I said. More than fair, actually. It's what everyone deserves. I hesitated, then continued. I'm going to address the class this morning about yesterday's demonstration. About my behavior, about assumptions and biases, about why what I did was wrong. I want to do it right, but I'm not sure exactly how to approach it. Any suggestions? Kendra finished her stretch, stood, looked at me directly. Just be honest, sir. Acknowledge what you did wrong, explain why it was wrong, and commit to doing better. Don't over-explain or make excuses. Don't center yourself in the apology. Keep it focused on the actual issue, behavior, and its impact, not on how bad you feel about it. That's very specific advice. I've received a lot of inadequate apologies in my life, she said with a slight smile. Gotten pretty good at identifying what makes them ineffective. Most people apologize to make themselves feel better, not to actually address the harm they caused. I'll try to do better than that. I believe you will, sir. She picked up her bag, headed toward the training area. Oh, an instructor. Thank you. For the apology yesterday, and for actually meaning it. A lot of people would have just gotten angry or defensive. I was tempted, I admitted. But then I would have learned nothing except how to be a bitter asshole who can't admit when he's wrong, and now instead you learned how to take a beating gracefully and grow from it, she said. Much more valuable skill in the long run. When the class assembled an hour later, I stood before them with none of my usual casual confidence. Just straightforward seriousness and a prepared speech I had spent most of the night working on. Before we begin today's training, I need to address yesterday's demonstration, I said. Specifically, my behavior leading up to it. I made jokes at Recruit Voss's expense regarding her medical condition and appearance. Those jokes were inappropriate, unprofessional, and cruel. They created a hostile training environment and failed to meet the standards of respect that everyone in this facility deserves. I paused, making eye contact with various recruits. I made those jokes because I made assumptions based on appearance. I saw someone small, recovering from illness, and visibly different from expected norms, and I concluded they were weak. Less capable. An acceptable target for humor. I was wrong on every count, as was thoroughly demonstrated in yesterday's combat exercise. Several recruits shifted uncomfortably. Vexus looked particularly awkward, probably remembering his own comments. This is a teaching facility, I continued. You're here to learn combat skills, tactical thinking, and military professionalism. Part of that professionalism is treating your fellow soldiers with respect regardless of their appearance, background, or any other factor unrelated to their performance. I failed to model that yesterday, and for that, I apologize to Recruit Voss and to all of you for setting a poor example. Kendra, sitting in the back row, gave a slight nod. Not forgiveness exactly, more like acknowledgement that I was handling this correctly. Moving forward, this facility will maintain strict standards regarding harassment and discrimination. That includes jokes about appearance, medical conditions, species characteristics, or any other personal attributes. If you have concerns about someone's capabilities, you address them through proper challenges within training parameters, not through mockery. Are we clear? Yes, sir, the class responded in unison. Good. Now, let's talk about what yesterday's demonstration actually taught us about combat dynamics and the danger of assumptions in tactical situations. The lesson proceeded normally after that, and gradually the atmosphere in the facility shifted. Recruits stopped making jokes about Kendra's appearance. More importantly, they started actually training with her, asking for technique tips, requesting to partner with her during drills. Within a week, she had become one of the most respected members of the class, her technical skills evident to anyone paying attention. Vexus, to his credit, approached her privately to apologize for his initial reaction. I know because I happened to witness it while reviewing security footage for entirely legitimate instructional purposes, definitely not because I was checking to make sure she was being treated appropriately. I'm sorry for laughing, Vexus said, his large frame somehow looking diminished by genuine contrition. It was reflexive and stupid. You've proven you belong here more than most of us. Apology accepted, Kendra said. For what it's worth, I don't blame you. People react to unexpected appearances. It's what you do after that first reaction that matters. Still, I should have been better. Now you will be, she said simply. That's growth. I'll take it. 2 weeks later, during a complex tactical exercise, Kendra demonstrated why her experience went beyond just personal combat. The scenario involved a hostage rescue situation, requiring teams to coordinate their approach, breach multiple entry points simultaneously, and neutralize hostiles without harming civilians. Most teams approached it as a combat problem, focusing on overwhelming force and speed. Kendra's team, with her as tactical lead despite being the lowest rank, treated it as a precision problem. She positioned team members based on their specific capabilities, coordinated timing to the second, and executed a breach that resulted in 0 civilian casualties and minimal hostile engagement. It was, according to Krell, who was evaluating the exercise, one of the cleanest tactical performances he had seen from a recruit team in 10 years. How did you plan that? I asked her afterward, reviewing the footage. It's not about overwhelming force, she explained, pointing to specific moments in the video. It's about precision and timing. We identified optimal positions, calculated angles of approach that minimized hostile reaction time, and synchronized our breach to create maximum confusion among defenders while maintaining absolute clarity for our team. That's advanced tactical thinking. It's chess, she said. Just faster and with higher stakes. You identify your opponent's possible moves, limit their options, force them into positions where they have no good choices, then execute your plan before they can adapt. Where did you learn tactical planning like that? Military preparation program back home, plus a lot of strategy games, honestly. Humans spend a lot of time simulating combat through entertainment. Games, movies, books, we've been telling war stories and playing war games for thousands of years. Some of that fictional experience translates to real tactical thinking. I made a note to research human entertainment media. If their games were teaching this level of tactical sophistication, that explained a lot about their combat effectiveness despite physical limitations. By the end of the first training cycle, 6 weeks total, Kendra had scored in the top 5% of the class on every metric. Physical conditioning, technical combat skills, tactical planning, weapons qualifications, even the written theoretical exams. She was, objectively, one of the best recruits I had ever trained. On the final day, during graduation ceremonies, I pulled her aside for a private conversation. "You've been offered 3 different advanced specialty tracks," I said, showing her the requests. "Special Operations wants you for their selection course. Tactical Planning Division wants you for their analysis program. And someone from Intelligence seems very interested in your file, though they were annoyingly vague about specifics. What do you think I should choose, sir?" she asked. "Honestly. Whatever challenges you most. You're too skilled to waste on standard deployment. You need something that will push you, force you to keep growing, because I think you're the type of person who stops growing only when you die." She smiled at that. "That's surprisingly philosophical, sir." "I have my moments." I paused, then continued. "For what it's worth, I'm putting in my formal recommendation that you be considered for instructor track eventually. Not now, you need field experience first, but down the line. You have the technical skills, the teaching ability we saw during that demonstration, and the patience to deal with idiots like me who need their assumptions beaten out of them. I'll keep that in mind, sir." She glanced toward where the rest of the graduating class was assembling. "Permission to speak freely?" "Always, Recruit Voss." "Well, Graduate Voss now. I suppose you became a better instructor after our fight. More careful, more thoughtful, more aware of your own biases. That's good. Hold on to that. Don't let comfort make you sloppy again." "Planning on coming back to keep me honest?" I asked. "Someone needs to," she said with a grin. "Can't have you getting complacent." She rejoined her class, and I watched her accept her honors and commendations with the same quiet competence she brought to everything. No grand celebrations, no dramatic speeches, just professional acknowledgement and immediate focus on what came next. Krell appeared beside me, watching the ceremony. "You know what the ironic thing is," he said. "What?" "She probably would have been fine with your initial jokes if you had apologized immediately and moved on. The fight only happened because you doubled down, made it worse, forced her to prove her point publicly, so my stubbornness created the situation where I got thoroughly beaten in front of my entire class." "Essentially, yes, fantastic. That makes me feel so much better about the whole experience." "It should," Krell said. "Because it means your character flaws directly resulted in a valuable learning experience. Some people pay good money for that kind of personal growth. I just paid with my dignity and several days of being a viral video sensation, a small price for wisdom," Krell said sagely. "Plus, you're now famous across multiple training facilities as that instructor who got wrecked by the bald human girl. That's a kind of immortality." "I hate you." "No, you don't." He was right, of course. I didn't hate him. I didn't even really hate the situation, not anymore. Yes, it had been humiliating. Yes, I had deserved every second of that humiliation. But I had learned something genuinely valuable about assumptions, about respect, about the danger of judging capabilities based on appearance. And I had gained immense respect for humans, for Kendra specifically, for what they could overcome and what they could achieve when people stopped underestimating them long enough to let them demonstrate their actual skills. 6 months later, I received a message from Kendra. She had completed Special Operations selection, finished top of her class there too apparently, and been assigned to an active combat unit. Her first deployment had gone well, though she couldn't provide details due to classification. She mostly wanted to check in, see how training was going, share some amusing anecdotes about her new teammates being surprised by her capabilities despite having access to her file. I wrote back, congratulating her and sharing my own update. I had implemented new anti-harassment protocols at the facility, created specific training modules about unconscious bias and the danger of assumptions, and started treating every recruit as potentially exceptional until they proved otherwise rather than the reverse. The changes had improved morale significantly and seemed to be producing better results across the board. Her reply was simple, glad the lesson stuck. Keep growing. Stay humble. And maybe ease up on the jokes about people's appearances. You're still not great at those. Sound advice from someone who had earned the right to give it. I printed out that message and pinned it next to my desk, a reminder that sometimes the best teachers are the ones who beat you thoroughly enough that you can't ignore the lesson, and that the people you most need to learn from are often the ones you initially dismissed. My name is Thraken, Senior Combat Instructor at the Orbital Defense Training Complex, Sector 9, and I made the mistake of mocking a human's appearance. She was small, recovering from serious illness, and had a shaved head that I turned into a joke. 10 minutes later, I was lying on the mat wondering how she had turned my own assumptions into weapons and deployed them with surgical precision against every bit of unearned confidence I possessed. I learned that day that judging a human by their appearance is like assuming a plasma grenade is harmless because it's small and shiny. The explosion still vaporizes you, you just don't see it coming until it's far too late. And sometimes, that explosion is exactly what you need to blast away the biases that were making you a worse instructor, a worse person, and a worse judge of genuine capability. So now I tell this story to every new class that comes through my facility. I show them the video, all 8 million views of it, because apparently my humiliation is educational content now. I explain exactly what I did wrong, why it was wrong, and how a 60-kilogram human with a shaved head taught me more about combat, respect, and professionalism in one sparring match than I had learned in 15 years of prior experience. And every time I tell this story, I end with the same advice Kendra gave me: never, ever underestimate someone based on appearance, because you never know what they've survived to get here or what they learned along the way. Especially if they're human. Especially if they're smiling. That smile means you're about to learn a very educational, very painful lesson about exactly how wrong you can be. Trust me on this. I have the viral video to prove it.